next presenters are Noah Huffman, Archivist for Metadata Systems and Digital Records, and Tracy Jackson, Head of Archival Processing Section, both at the Rubenstein Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Duke University. And they'll be presenting It's in the Cards, Integrating ArchivesSpace with Trello for Better Processing Project Management. This lightning talk will introduce a lightweight ArchivesSpace Trello integration that automatically creates Trello cards when new accession records are added to ArchivesSpace. The integration is based on a simple Python script that uses the ArchiveSnake and PyTrello Python libraries to access data from the ArchivesSpace API and post it to Trello using the Trello API. Presenters will describe Duke's use case for creating the integration and explain how it streamlines the way they manage processing projects. The presentation will include screenshots, more information and documentation is available on GitHub and linked through the forum wiki. So with that, I will turn things over to Noah and Tracy.
Thanks, Jessica. Let me just share my screen here. Great. Can you all see that?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. So yeah, thanks for that great introduction. You really spoiled the meat of the talk, but that's all right. We'll go forward anyway. We're hoping, Tracy and I are hoping we can get through this without any interruptions, although we do have a hurricane bearing down on us here in North Carolina. So we're really excited to share some of the work that we've been doing, or that we did about 6 months ago in the before. Hello. Here's just a quick outline of what we hope to cover in this talk. So we'll go over our use case, so how we use ArchivesSpace and Trello in our department. Integration in action. I'll briefly talk about how we develop the integration, so a high-level overview of some of the technical bits. And then we'll provide some information on how you can go about setting up the integration and configuring it in your local environment. So before we get in, one is unfamiliar with Trello. Trello is a free collaborative project management tool. There's also a paid version, but we're using the free version at Duke. According to the Trello website, Trello allows you to organize your projects into boards, and it helps you see what's being worked on, who's working on what, and where something is in any given process. Trello uses what they call cards, which are kind of like Post-it notes, sort of virtual Post-it notes, to represent projects or tasks. And you can move these cards through various states in a workflow. And here you can see a very zoomed out view of our archival processing Trello board in the Rubenstein. There are a lot of cards, a lot of workflow state. And just tool for project work. To Tracy to tell you her processing work and why we integrate it with ArchivesSpace.
Talk briefly about why we use Trello and the need we had around getting information from ArchivesSpace. So we're a big shop. We've got 11 people in technical services who handle collection materials and or description in some and while FY had more than 4,000 linear feet. We do typically have at least 12 to 1,300 linear feet per year. It's been on an upward trend. Last calendar year, that meant we had 316 separate sessions. Again, slightly high, but it is part of an upward trend for us. Next one, please. Until fall of 2019, we had 2 separate sort of administrative sections of archival and manuscript processing staff. The other section head, Megan Lyon, screenshot of that. If you could go to the next one, please. For seeing who was working on what. That section, all accessions came through one person who made not every accession got a Trello card if it was a very quick, easy thing. And publishing description was a separate communication and workflow. Next, please. The board had multiple columns to capture where collections were in the processing workflow, from when they came in, through arrangement and description, and then through done. Go ahead to the next one. Here's a title, collecting area, center, which is an important thing for us to track. We use that as a label, so different areas have different colors, and the ability to assign a processor to the card that's a member. So each processor is a member and they can be assigned to a card. Go ahead to the next one. So with some staffing changes last year that saw Megan, who was the previous owner of this board, become 9% of most of the processors. Created by additional people and many more accessions needing to get added to the board. With a larger group to manage, I wanted to streamline not only tracking collections work through processing or throughout processing, but I also saw an opportunity to make our descriptive output more consistent. So in Trello, I saw a way to automate some communication about where things were. Next one, please. To describe and added to the Trello board. That reduced duplicate work in creating Trello cards. It also made sure that we could catch everything coming in, as every accession got a Trello card. As a bonus, it also meant we could add review and publication steps to the Trello board, although that's out of scope for this discussion. And next card, please. Slide. By automatically pulling data from ArchivesSpace, Trello cards now have much more information. While the accession record in ArchivesSpace is still the place processors should go for all information about an accession, it's still the place of record, the Trello card does provide more context and more helpful information. It includes the accession number, some additional descriptive information about the accession. And so it helps me assign cards as needed. And this has been a massive improvement for me in managing the section and our work. I'll turn it over to Noah for the next one.
Great. So Tracy sort of summarized how we use Trello. So what does our ArchivesSpace and Trello integration actually do? It's really very simple. Integration is kind of a misleading word. This is really just an automated way to push information from ArchivesSpace to Trello. And so I thought the easiest way to sort of explain how this works is to walk you through it. So the first step is either a curator or somebody in technical services will create a new accession record in ArchivesSpace. And this looks pretty familiar to folks probably. Fire session, some content description. And then we have some additional sort of custom fields that we've added to our session records at Duke. You can see some of these here. So special media formats, whether or not this a session is new or in addition to an existing collection. And then we also capture information about the research center to which the session belongs. This is a kind of Duke specific thing, but and then also the primary collector name who is responsible for acquiring that thing. Then we fill out a collection management subrecord in ArchivesSpace. This has some notes for the processor. And then finally, if there is an existing resource record in ArchivesSpace that a session will be added to, we go ahead and make that link explicit here in the related resources section. So then at 1 a.m. every morning, there's a script that sort of automatically runs. And what it does is it searches in ArchivesSpace for all the accessions created in the last 24 hours. And then what it does is it creates a new Trello card for all of those accessions that it finds from the last day. And here you can just see an example of one of those cards on the right. When it creates these new cards, it maps certain session records to the Trello card, and that's what the eddy of arrows is showing you here. One thing I wanted to call out, there's this blue arrow which sort of represents something a little bit different. We take this research center information from the accession record and we use it to create these custom labels in Trello. And these labels are just a way that we are better able to visualize and sort of organize and distribute these cards in Trello. So in addition, the script that runs nightly also sends me an email of its activity. I usually don't read these, it's just kind of a sanity check and confirmation that the integration script is running and working properly. The email really just includes the terminal output of the script when it runs. It could probably use some improvements in the formatting, but it really works fine for the purpose that it serves. So here you can see sort of a full column of new accession cards from our Trello instance on the left, and then kind of a blown up view of a single card on the right. There's also some logic in the integration script that if any given accession does not already have a related resource record in ArchivesSpace, it will sort of say that explicitly in Trello. That's kind of what I've highlighted here in this red bubble. So that's basically how the integration works in a nutshell. So far, we've created about 120 new Trello cards this way in the past 6 months, even though we've really only been accessioning electronic records related collections during COVID. So once these cards exist in Trello, assign them to processors, we can hear about any work that needs to happen, and then we can move them through other workflow columns in Trello. One really important thing to note is that any further editing of the cards in Trello or any further editing of accession records in ArchivesSpace really has no effect on the other system. So this is basically just a one space to Trello. So how did we go about building this? So first we developed some really loose guiding principles, and a lot of these are similar to the ones that the folks from the Rockefeller Archive Center mentioned earlier, which I thought was great. So we decided that ArchivesSpace is really our system of record for all accession and collection description, and that Trello is just for workflow management and workflow tracking. So what this means is that the data in Trello is really ephemeral, and that's okay with us. So while ArchivesSpace is really good at managing data, it's not so good at workflow tracking. And so we felt that developing this kind of loose integration with Trello would be a lot easier than writing an ArchivesSpace plugin and trying to sort of shoehorn this workflow tracking functionality into the ArchivesSpace code itself. So since Trello is already really good at workflow tracking, we wanted to just let each system do what it does best. And because both systems have APIs, we decided we should take advantage of them. So here are the basic components of this integration. It's just a simple Python script. Really, it's just one script. It's written in Python 3. I happen to use the Anaconda distribution of Python, but that is not a requirement. The script uses the ArchiveSnake Python library. I know there's a workshop on Friday about ArchiveSnake if you're more interested in that. The script also uses a PyTrello Python library. This is just to simplify working with the Trello API. So the script itself is executed by a cron job in Linux, and cron is just a standard Linux tool that lets you schedule when you want to run a script. Again, I set this up to run at 1 a.m. every night. Before this project, I'd never really set up a cron job before, but it's fairly simple and there's a lot of documentation available on the web. So both the Python script and the Linux cron job are hosted on a Linux virtual machine. Duke has this great service where they offer free VMs to all students and staff. These are sort of intended to be experimental, but that's what I'm using to host this project, and it's been working fine so far. And then finally, you'll need a Trello account, and then you'll need to request an API key for that Trello account so that you can work with the Trello API. And there's documentation on how to do that, how to request those API keys freely available on the web, as well as on the GitHub repo for this project. So again, everything you need to set this up is explained in the README at the GitHub link that you see here on the screen. Here are some screenshots of what you'll find in the GitHub README. As for customizations, the README will walk you through sort of where to modify the script to supply your particular ArchivesSpace and Trello login credentials. It'll explain how to set up the cron job that I mentioned. Perhaps you want to schedule the service to run more frequently than every night, or maybe you want to run it at a different time. It'll explain how to change those things here. The README will tell you how to modify the script if you want to assign kind of different custom Trello labels than the ones that we're using, or if you want to assign members to various cards based on some particular workflow or tracking need that you have in your context. So in closing, this is just a really simple integration. I kind of hesitate to use the word integration, but it does one simple thing. It makes Trello cards based on ArchivesSpace data. And just as some context, I developed this kind of setup over the course of maybe 2 days. It really didn't take that long. It went from experimental to sort of production really quickly. We didn't have to consult library IT or campus IT to set this up. We just set it up on our own in technical services. Admittedly, the script is probably a bit crufty, but it has been doing what it's designed to do. So in my opinion, it works fine. If it breaks, it's not really a huge deal for us. So the stakes, I think, with this are pretty low. But again, we've been running this for about 6 months without any real problems. And in general, this integration has really helped streamline our processing workflows and improved communication among folks in our processing team, especially now that we're all working remotely during COVID. So thanks, that's it. Again, almost everything I just said is described in this GitHub README here. So check it out if you're interested. Thanks, and Tracy and I are happy to take questions in the few minutes we might have to do that.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. We are running up against time, but we're going to take like 2 minutes to ask a few questions. First of all, someone did say in the chat that it looks very pretty, and I agree. That was very pretty to look at and very satisfying. Another person has asked, and of course, Noah and Tracy, if you know the answer, please feel free, but I'll just go ahead and open it up and people can contribute in the chat. Does anyone know if there's a similar integration with Jira? And to that end, someone else has asked, did you experiment with Jira versus Trello, Noah and Tracy?
I am not aware of another integration with Jira. If Jira has sort of an open and documented API, it probably wouldn't be that difficult to kind of recreate what we did with Trello in Jira. But I'm not aware of if anyone's done that.
We did not really experiment with, we didn't even think about Jira, partly because we already had the Trello board in existence, and partly because we have used Jira, or Duke uses Jira in other contexts, and Trello just seemed like a lower barrier for us and for the processors who are going to be using it.
Thank you. Yeah, and someone has put in the chat, and I was in the same workshop or same webinar that the Society of California Archivists did do a webinar about something similar using Airtable. So if you're looking at other tools, that is another one. For Noah, do you need a paid Trello account for API access?
No, you don't. We are using a free account and, are able to access the API without any issue.
All right, thank you. When processing or cataloging is complete for an accession, do you update ArchivesSpace accession records, or is workflow status simply not tracked in ArchivesSpace at all?
That's a great question. We do still update the accession records. Basically, once the Trello card is created, there's then two separate tracking. We do then mark the accession record as complete, and then that helps us generate our end of year stats. Trello is really just for workflow, what is happening right now. We don't actually use it for any statistics gathering. So the ArchivesSpace accession record update is still very important for us.
Thanks. Oh, wow, we're getting several questions. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask very quickly. Let's try to cover these questions and then any further questions, maybe if Noah and Tracy could answer them in the chat. Or answer them in the Q&A. Could this be modified to pull over resource records instead of accession records?
Yeah, that should be pretty easy. If you're at all familiar with Python and you kind of look at the script, the way it's set up, it wouldn't be too difficult to just switch it from looking for accessions to looking for resources.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Someone else has asked in the Q&A if you looked at Asana. I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it sounds like you guys are pretty committed to Trello. But if anyone else is familiar with that and would like to answer in the chat if they've explored that tool, or maybe Noah and Tracy, you have.
Yeah, I haven't worked with Asana, but I mean, similarly, if Asana has an API, you could sort of do the same thing in Asana. Like Tracy said, we had kind of committed to Trello before we decided to even do this integration. So it was just a matter of putting the two systems together.
Right. Thanks. Is this repository specific, or does it force all of your repos into the same process?
Currently, the way it's written, it only looks for one particular repository. That's just because we really only have one repository at Duke. I'm sure you could modify it to look at all repositories.
Cool. Good to know it's flexible. Do you know if this could be integrated with Microsoft Planner?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Microsoft Planner sounds not fun, though.
Okay.
Sorry, Dawn.
Yeah, sorry, Dawn. All right. What a fun note to end it on. Well, thank you both very much for the presentation and for answering all of those questions. It does look very pretty. And we will make sure that all of the slides and GitHub links to everyone's presentations are linked on the wiki. So if you are interested in this integration, those will be available on the wiki after the forum. So thank you to Noah and Tracy again. And we're going to just move into our next session. Next up, it is Christine DeBella discussing recent updates and what's to come in ArchivesSpace.